Happy Monday, readers. Today for reading workshop, you're going to need sticky notes, crayons, highlighters, your reading workshop notebook, and your green ELA folder. Remember, don't take this out of your anchor binder. Make sure that it stay inside, but we're going to go ahead and open it up. You should have your new teach pages that you got from school a couple weeks ago. You're going to take those out. Carefully take out the first four. The first one, implicit versus explicit, and then three more that say inference at the top, or infer, that's the same idea. Take those four teach pages out. Make sure the rest are still paper clipped for later on, and then close that folder and keep it in your anchor binder so you can have it for next time. In your notebook, you're going to go ahead and open up to our last lesson from last week, which was on synthesizing. We had synthesized using the story of the bad ants, or two bad ants, and then you were to finish up your flip book using your own book from the Epic website. So we're going to go ahead and look back at our page, which was page 33. Take your pencil and we're going to go ahead and label the next one as page 34. When we go back to the table of contents, this is our last official lesson in this unit. Tomorrow we will be having a test, which you will be using your notebook, so make sure that your notebook is complete. So this is our last reading strategy that we're focusing on explicitly, and then we will continue to cycle back and review these as we continue our reading lessons throughout the year. So we are going to be focusing on number 34 is a lesson called Inferences. And then today's date is 9-14-20. So we're going to go ahead and get our pages set up, and then we'll start with our lesson. We're going to change the order, so make sure you're listening carefully. So the first one we're going to glue down is the one just says inference with the little girl on the side that says read between the lines. Use your glue stick and make your frame on the outside, and then crisscross. Smooth that down. You're going to then flip the page. You're going to use the next one that says, how do you infer? Make sure you're putting these in the order that Mrs. Ling's putting them in my notebook, so you have them ready. So this is on the left side of the next page. Then on the right side, we're going to use the one that says inference example. And then crisscross. And then turn one more time. And we're going to be using both of these, but we're going to be using one for our teach page on the right side in a moment. When we get to that, we'll be using that for our modeling of how do we use this strategy of inferring as we read. So go ahead and smooth that down as well. So we're going to go back to the first teach page. We have quite a few pages that we're going to refer to, so that's why we want to make sure they're in the right order. So as we talked about at the beginning, we're going to be learning the last reading strategy that we're going to be taught explicitly right now is how do we infer when we encounter new texts or as we're reading a new book. So we first need to know what does that mean to infer? So when we look at the first teach page, this is going to focus on this strategy of inferring or inferences. So an inference is what we call an educated guess. So you can underline educated guess. It's also referred to as when we read between, and I want us to box that word between the lines. So we might have to look at what the author's providing us and think a little bit more deeply of what is the author really telling us that they're maybe not using in direct words. And then the third description is reading facts and evidence to reach a logical conclusion or opinion. So when we're reading facts and evidence, we're going to talk about what does that mean when we talk about inferences, and then with the reading between the line, because there's two different pieces of details that we look for when we do this. The last part of this teaching page, it says, what is the text trying to tell you without coming right out and writing it word for word? So this is us looking between the lines of what the author is actually providing us in the text. So we might use a sentence stem to start our conversation or our sticky note. The author wants me to think, or I'm guessing, and then we're telling what the guess might be, and because, and this is where we would put the evidence to help support why our guess, and that's why it's called an educated guess. We don't just take a wild guess without any kind of evidence or reason for that thinking, but this is us basing it back in the text, which is the author's words. And do I need to change my thinking? So we're going to go ahead and turn the page and continue talking about inferencing. So we need to know, well, how do I infer? So this next part, we're going to be using our crayons to help us visually understand the 3 steps to when we infer. So you're going to need a red, a yellow, and a green. So you can always pause the video so you can get your materials out and then push play when you're ready. So let me get my red. I actually grabbed an orange. So the first one we're going to say is red is stop and then think back in our schema. So we're going to go ahead and box the bolded words and the color that they're referring to, just to help us with our visual tracking. And then I'm going to just go ahead and circle the first part of the stoplight as a reminder that this is where I need to stop. So when we first encounter a book, we have to stop and think back in our memory or our own experiences. So it says to think back to our prior knowledge and what you already know. So thinking back schema is the first step. The second step to actually inferring as you read is us to slow down or to begin slowly by thinking about the evidence the author's providing us in the text. So we're going to go ahead and box that in yellow and circle the picture on the left in yellow as well. So they have a magnifying glass because they're telling us, well, we need to look for the evidence that's provided in the text or the clues that are going to help us with coming up with the educated guess. So we first had our background knowledge and now we're looking for the evidence that's right there within the text. And then the last one is the green, and it says to go for an inference. We're developing our ideas from combining the schema. We said that's the first step. That's our prior knowledge and the evidence. So that's the clues in the text to make a judgment or to form an opinion and draw a conclusion of why something is happening the way it is. So we're going to go ahead and box that in green. So as we have been talking about the reading strategies, we've been talking about, well, at times we need to use experiences that we've already had as a reader to help us better understand our characters or why the author's providing this for us in a text. We also want to look at the evidence, so the author's direct words. It's important to know why the author is including the information they are. And now we're putting those pieces together, becoming a more complex reader by thinking, well, how does this affect my character, or why is the character acting the way they are? So these are our inferences. We're developing these ideas by making judgments, opinions, and drawing conclusions by putting those different things back together in a puzzle. So we're going to look at an actual example on the right-hand side. So it says, in the text, it would say, the thunder boomed. My dog hid under the bed and was shaking like a leaf. So these are the actual author's words within the text. Well, we need to come up with our authentic discussion, or how we can talk, our authentic talking that we could record on a sticky note. So we could say, I know, so I'm going to go ahead and think, well, this is part of me going back to my prior knowledge or my schema. I know that thunder is loud. And then the next statement, I also know, so it says, I know that loud noises can be scary. So we're looking back, and this part is our red, thinking back. So I'm going to even now underline this whole section in red to say that this is my schema going back in what I know about a topic. So we know that thunder is loud. We know that loud noises can be scary. Now we're going into our, our evidence. So we're going to say the text says the dog was shaking and hiding under the bed. So this next part is the actual evidence from the text. So going back and using the author's words. So this is why we're gathering the prior knowledge beforehand. And now we're using the author's words. So underline that section in yellow. That's the evidence from the text. In the last sentence, it says, I can infer, so we know that this is our green, how we're developing this strategy. I can infer that the dog is scared. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that in green to say that I use my own schema. I related it to what the author is providing within the text, and I'm putting those two pieces of a puzzle together to come up with an educated guess of why my character is acting the way they are. So I can infer that the dog is scared. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue talking about inferences, but now we're going to talk about, well, how can we find the evidence? Evidence within a text comes to us in two different ways. So this is where we're going to use our highlighter. And we're going to be talking about when details are either given to us in implicit ways or explicit ways. So I'm going to put this in the first color highlighter. So implicit versus explicit. So for this particular part, we're going to first by defining what does that word mean, implicit. So we're going to use a second color to highlight because we want to make sure that we're visually seeing that these are important words that we're going to be using. So implicit information. Implicit information is information that we know even though it is not directly stated. And that is the key to implicit. It is not directly stated. So the author is not using the words specifically in their text. We're going to infer their meaning. So this is the between the lines thinking. So we're going to write between the lines thinking. And we're going to try to visually remember, well, what does implicit mean? So when we think of the word implicit, I'm going to rewrite it because we always like to try to come up with a trick. When I think of the word implicit, I know that it starts with the capital letter I or a letter I. Implicit is going to be the same thinking as when I have to do my inferring. So it's not directly told to me. I have to use my background knowledge, author's words that they are giving us, and come up with a reason why someone is doing or acting the way they are. When we then transition to the next type of information or details, we're going to highlight, it says explicit. So be very mindful that this is two different words that are going to refer to two different ideas. When we have explicit information, the information is directly stated. So we're going to box those two words, directly stated in the text. So the author is telling us with their exact words in the text. So we're going to say, and off to the side, author says in text. So this is different. We're not having to read between the lines any longer. We're actually reading the exact words from the author. And our visual reminder of what explicit means, we're going to rewrite the word explicit. And anytime we see the word explicit, I want you to think of the first two letters of the word explicit. Explicit means that it's being explained, because it starts with the same two letters, explained in the text from the author. So implicit means we're reading between the lines, and explicit means that it's being explained by the actual author. And we're just being reminded at the bottom, so we're going to use our highlighter again for our last definition. Inferences is a conclusion we can make using our prior knowledge and explicit information. So that's very important for us to remember, that making that inference is looking for the prior knowledge or schema and the explicit evidence from the text. So remember that implicit means we're doing the inferring, but we need to be able to then identify what does it mean to actually do the inference. All right, today for our modeling, we're going to be looking on the right side, and we're going to be using our understanding of how to gather information and differentiate between explicit and implicit by reading the story, The Giving Tree. Well, we need to make sure that we're able to mark our information down on our page to track our thinking. So we're going to draw a tree. So this is similar to what we did on our Fun Friday activity where we did the picture this game. So go ahead and draw yourself a trunk of a tree, and then you can draw a nice open kind of top of the tree, so where all the branches are. Just make sure that you're giving yourself a lot of room, so try to use the whole page so you have room on either side of the trunk, that the top of the tree or the branches is only at the top, like 1/3, maybe 1/2 at the very most. So when we read this particular story, I want you to think about how do we infer with implicit information and explicit information. Explicit information is what we can actually see, so like the top of the tree. Implicit information is under the surface that we have to dig for, like the roots of the tree. So we're going to then draw like our grass, just draw like zigzaggy lines, which then means that these can then, or this portion of the tree can turn into the roots. So you can just draw however you think your roots might look for your tree. So we're going to include our implicit information at the top of the tree. So words that the author is giving us specifically because they're explaining with their words. And then as you read, I want you to be tracking information that implicitly was told to you, where you have to read between the lines of what the author is really meaning by the information they're providing. So we're going to write on the trunk, the story, The Giving Tree. And we're going to just track by labeling our sections. So we're going to put at the top in the trunk, explicit information. Go ahead and underline it. And then at the bottom where we have the roots, you can put implicit information and underline it. So for both sections, as I'm reading the story, I want you to think of, is the author telling me or explaining with their words? You write it in the branches. If it's implicit information, something the author is not directly stating, but wanting us to read between the lines, you're going to give that information there, okay? So the story that we're going to be reading is called The Giving Tree, and I hope that you've read this story before because it's such a great story, what happens with our character. The Giving Tree. Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come, and he would gather her leaves and make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples, and they would play hide and go seek. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. So we're going to pause our reading to make sure that we go back to our paper to track. So we know that we're trying to come up with explicit information or information that is explained by the author. So we can say, the boy loved the tree. We can also say, the boy used the tree a lot. So we just read, and when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much, and the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older, and the tree was often alone. So before we continue reading, we can jot down some more explicit information. So we can say, as time went by, we can look back in the text, it says, the tree was often alone. So we'll say, as time went by, the tree was often alone. Then one day the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and eat apples and play in my shade and be happy." "I am too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples." "Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money and you will be happy." And so the boy climbed up the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away, and the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy, and she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." "I am too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife and I want children, and so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house, but you may cut off my branches and build a house. Then you will be happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she said. "Come and play. I am too old and sad to play," said the boy. "I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "Then you can sail away and be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And the tree was happy, but not really. And after a long time, the boy came back again. "I am sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone. My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I am too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot," or trunk of the tree, "you cannot climb." "I am too tired to climb," said the boy. "I am sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish that I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I am just an old stump. I am sorry." "I don't need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I am very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could, "well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down and rest." And the boy did. And the tree was happy. The end. So as we go back to our tracking paper with our tree, we're going to continue to write some of the explicit information. So the words the author is using within the text to explain what's happening with our characters. So we said the boy loved the tree. We can also say, and the tree loved the boy, because that's evident in what the author used the words. The boy used the tree a lot. Well, we could say that we can track what they did with the tree. So looking back in the text, because we want to use the actual word from the text. So we said The boy came every day, gathered leaves, so we can say the boy used the tree a lot. So we'll put gathered leaves. We'll put another dash to keep tracking. He used those. He climbed on the trunk, so we're going to put climb trunk. And then swing from the branches, so we're going to say swing. Eat apples. Hide and go seek. Go seek. I just did a symbol for the and, so you can write the word out or you can do the same. And then sleep under the shade. So this is explicit information, the words the author is using. And then we said, as time went by, the tree was often alone. So we want to make sure that we don't just track what happened at the beginning of the story with the explicit information, but we want to continue to explain what was going on. So we said, as time went by and the boy grew older, their tree was often alone. Well, we want to explain what the tree was still doing. So we want to say, tree gave, and then we want to continue to write what she continued to give the boy. So it said about the money, but it was taking the leaves and apples to sell. So we're going to say take apples to sell. Then he came back and he wanted to have a house to keep his family warm. So she gave him, cut off the branches. So cut off branches. When we continue to read, then we said, well, he wanted a boat. So he said, or the tree said to cut down the trunk to make a boat. So cut down trunk. And then the last thing that the tree was able to provide was a stump. So let him use her to sit on stump. So we have been able to track some of the explicit information that the author is providing for us with the exact words. Now, the implicit information, if we look back at the definition on our left side, it says this is what we have to infer, why we're reading between the lines to use our background about some of these events, and then the author's explicit words to come up with an educated guess of why our character was acting the way they were. So we're going to kind of go through some of these events. So the first is the boy loved the tree and the tree loved the boy. So we're going to say implicitly, maybe the author's trying to tell us that when we're young, we have more carefree outlook and we enjoy the simple things in life. So we can say, when young, we are able to enjoy the simple things in life. And that can be relationships or the things that are actually just around us. Then when we continue moving through our explicit information, we said the boy used the tree a lot, gather leaves, climb trunk, swing, eat apples, hide and go seek, and sleep under shade. So that still goes into our same idea of, well, when we're little, we are able to use our imagination or use what's around us and be able to enjoy and just kind of fill our time. So when we said when young, we are able to enjoy the simple things in life, we can also put a little dash and be happy. When we look around at the next point, as time went by, the tree was often alone. We could say, as we get older, our focus and priorities change. So going from our character as a young boy, he just wanted to play and have fun. And now as he's getting older, he wants to be able to make money, to have a good life. He wants to have a house for a family, and then he wants to have a boat to be able to kind of get away and maybe do something different. And then in the end, with the being an old man, well, now he's kind of cycling back through to just needing a place to kind of rest. And then the last one is Tree gave, it took the apples to sell, and we went through that as well. So we can also then talk about that's a relationship, and we try to do our best with the ones that we care for, trying to give until we can't give anymore. And then it's the only thing we have left is our own selves. So we can also maybe implicitly or infer that we try to always make others happy. And you can continue to write to explain that you try to do everything, and sometimes you give too much, that you then are not yourself anymore, that you are down to the very basic or very smallest part of yourself. So we can implicitly write some more information, and if you want to include more details, you may. So the focus of this book was to understand that the author was giving us exact words, our explicit or explained text, and we're using that explained text or details to implicitly understand what the author is saying. Today, during your epic reading, you're going to be using the same idea on a sticky note. So you're going to put a sticky note on your page. You're going to tell me the title of your story, and then you're going to make a T-chart. Your T-chart, you're going to keep track of the explicit information. Remember, that's explained details from the text. And then you're going to tell me, well, what does that mean? What can you create as an educated guess of why the author included those details? Today, when you're done, you're going to take a picture of all of your teach pages. So going back to page 34, show me that they're glued in correctly. You should have your giving tree completed, and then your sticky note is done as well.